Baik, terima kasih. Selamat pagi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ini sesinya dalam bahasa Inggris, jadi saya mesti siap-siap. So, greetings to National Council members, IAI, members, participants in this international seminar commemorating IAI's 66th anniversary. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this seminar on digital innovation in finance and business, impact to accountancy and business. I'm honored to be your moderator for these sessions. Before we start, as we still feel excited about last night Lenong, siapa yang datang ya Lenong semalam ya, banyak sekali ya. Allow me to share my own pantun, but this one will be in English, is it okay? Hybrid ya, pantun hybrid. Flock of birds fly over Jakarta Bay, a mother holds her baby with tenderness. My friend, today is EI's birthday. I wish all EI members good health and happiness. Well, these topics are essential for accountants as they enable the professions to advance in the future. This will provide you with some valuable tips and insights. In this seminar, we will have 4 panelists who are experts in different aspects of these digital innovations. On my left, Navin, Sasidaran. Actually, they are representing these large organizations. Yeah, one by one, Navin is from the ICAEW, and then Atanius Tanubrata, Pak Tanu ya, Tanu, is from CPA Australia, also representing BDO Indonesia. Andrew Ling represents ACCA, as well as he is the CFO of Tunas Ridian. And lastly, but very important, is kebalik tadi. Florentius Suryo Susilo, panggilannya Flo. He represents CIMA. So these all gentlemen represent large organizations. Each panelist will give a brief introductions of themselves and their topic, followed by a 15 minutes presentations. After that, we will have 30 minutes overall, the Q&A sessions, where you can ask any question you may have to the panelists. You can also share your comments and feedbacks with us through the chat functions over the Zoom or this media. So without further ado, please welcome our first presenter, Mr. Navin. Time is yours.
Thank you, thank you. Good morning. Good morning. I need to, can I get my slides up? Okay, yes, that's yours. Okay. Once again, good morning, everyone. Okay, it's a real pleasure to be here. To give you some context, right? So, I'm obviously not Indonesian. I love Indonesia. I have a lot of Indonesian friends, but I'm not. I'm Singaporean. I'm a member of ICAEW. So, I think today's session, all the accounting bodies were invited to have a speaking slot. And ICAEW Indonesia and ICAEW Singapore, they work quite closely, so they invited ICAEW Indonesia asked ICAEW Singapore, would any of your members like to come and speak? So I said, okay, I don't mind. You know, I actually, interestingly, I've been to Bali, Batam, Bintan so many times, but I've never been to Jakarta. So this is my first time in Jakarta, and I'm absolutely happy to be here. Congratulations to IAI. So my topic today is value creation using digitalization and technology, right? And before that, let me introduce myself a bit more, right? Okay, so who am I, right? I say I'm Singaporean, I'm married, father of 2 kids, and I love football, right? I love football very, very much. I'm a Liverpool fan, which is great because we are top of the table now. So hopefully that continues for a long time. Then, okay, so I started my career with PwC in Singapore in 2005. I then went on to PwC in London for another 3 years. Came back, I spent another 10 years in PwC before deciding I don't want to do audit anymore. I went to join a client. My client was Changi Airport Group. You may have heard of it. And then after 1.5 years, I decided, no, I prefer audit, and I came to join RSM in Singapore. So I'm actually a partner now doing audit mainly in RSM in Singapore. So why am I here? If I'm our audit partner, why am I here talking about digitalization and technology? Like I said, I'm a member of ICAW, so I got asked to do this, and I volunteered. But when I was in PwC Singapore, we were trying to roll out data, the use of data in technology, in audit, to try and improve audit. So I was leading the team. So I actually got to see a lot of how technology is used in audit. When I joined Changi Airport Group, I joined internal audit, and I was tasked to drive the use of technology in internal audit. Right? So with these topics, I think ICAW felt that I could talk on this topic, so I'm very happy to be here. But let me go back. Oops. Okay, sorry, technology fails. Okay, so the topic today is value creation using digitalization and technology. So they gave me 15 to 20 minutes. You know, this topic, I could really talk for like hours, right? So that's not the point. So I thought about it. What do I want to talk about today to you guys? And I realized that actually I just want to talk about very simple. How does technology affect us as accountants? We're all a room full of accountants, right? How do we stay? Are we even still relevant? And if we are still relevant, how do we add value, right? So that's what I wanted to talk about today. And before I do that, maybe I just broadly touch on some concepts of the different stages of technological adoption, right? Typically, you see digitization, digitalization, and digital transformation. When I first started out looking at technology, I couldn't tell the difference between all these three. They're all the same to me, right? But of course, there are differences. I think a lot of you would be aware of these differences. So if you think about digitization, for example, imagine you're a company and you have warehouses full of old shipping documents, and you decide, okay, you know what, I don't want to have this in a warehouse anymore. I want to put them online because I'm going to launch a new ERP system. So you hire a few temporary staff to go and scan one after another, right? That is digitization. Taking what is in hard copy and putting it in soft copy, that's digitization. Then what is digitalization? Digitalization is going one step further. Let's say you have a process that is done manually, maybe three-way match. You get someone to sit down in a room to match your delivery order and your invoice and your purchase or whatever it is, right? Three-way match. Now you get a system to do it. That is digitalization, right? Taking one process and getting it automated. And then finally, what is digital transformation? This is beyond. This is rethinking your entire business model and trying to put technology all around it, and that is a digital transformation. So the reality is many companies are at different stages. One thing's for sure, what you hear about other people may not be true. Sometimes you go to conferences like this and people tell you, oh yeah, I'm in digital transformation stage. The truth is probably not, right? The reality is everybody is struggling with it. Everybody is trying. What's important is we keep moving along this stage, right? That's what's important, right? And I wanted to share this as a start of my presentation to create some context as to what I'm going to share, right? So then we talk about, okay, you know, digitalization. There are different types of technology, right? There's RPA, robotic process automation, which is simply taking a system to do a process that was manual. So you don't need a staff to go and do the three-way match anymore because your system can read the three documents and do the match for you. There's big data, right? This is data analytics, taking all the data in the company, putting it together, coming up with a nice report, data analytics. A blockchain, used largely in cryptocurrency to track ownership of digital assets. Very important. And then, of course, the big one today, AI, right? AI, there's predictive AI, which helps you to predict, which uses machine learning to predict outcomes. And then there's generative AI, which can easily mimic what I'm talking about, can use my face and come up with a speech, right? So there's a lot of things. And the reality is, I'm not going to go into the detail of all of these. That's not the purpose of my presentation today. But what we need to know is, it's here to stay, and it's growing at a pace faster than we can imagine, right? So then what does this mean, right? Does this mean this room full of accountants will no longer be relevant, right? I don't think so, and I assume that all of you also don't think so. right? Because you're all here today. But the reality is, the answer to the question is yes and no. Music to accompany my speech, right? No, so the reality is, the question of will technology replace the role of an accountant? The answer is yes and no, right? If you look back in history, right, the reality is that change and disruption will always come, and it's one of the few constants in the world. We can't run away from it, right? But then we ask ourselves, when change and disruption comes, what are the roles that always get disrupted first? What are the roles? It's always those roles that have low judgment and are repeatable. If your role is repeatable with low judgment, chances are you're the first to get disrupted. I'll give you an example, right? So when I was working with Changi Airport, as you can imagine, as an airport, one of our main source of revenue is landing fees, parking fees, right? So when a plane lands, depending on the model of the aircraft, the size of the aircraft, there's a certain fee. And when it parks at the gate, if it parks for 1 hour, there's a certain fee, 2 hours, there's a certain fee, etc. Right? So you can imagine, there's thousands of flights a day, right? We had 2 accountants sitting there every day, looking at the flight manifest and calculating the landing and parking fees. For so long, they were doing that, right? Then eventually technology came. And technology was able to do this, obviously, because it's a simple fixed rate, and they're only planes of a certain sizes, right? So once technology were able to do it, what happened to these 2 staff? The company felt, they're so loyal, let's keep them. So basically, the technology would compute the revenue, and these 2 staff would also still go and calculate manually to recompute the revenue to see whether it ties. So they continued doing this for a while. And eventually management said, there's no use for this role. And the role was cut, right? Because the role is repeatable and low judgment, right? There's so many examples like this, but the reality is that's what disruption will take first. So then as an accountant, how do we stay relevant? How do we rise above what is repeatable and what is low judgment? I have some thoughts, right? And firstly, ask ourselves. So some of the younger students, when I talk to them, they said, should we all then go and be data scientists? No need to be accountant already, right? Sure, you can. But let me tell you, right, if you think accountancy is tough, data science is also very tough. You must be committed. Right? In accountancy world, IFRS maybe comes out with a big new standard every 3-4 years. Every year got a few enhancements, but every 3-4 years a big new standard. In data, almost every second there's an update. Technology evolves so fast. I had a data scientist in my team. 3 years after graduating, she said she feels obsolete because she can't keep up. So if you want to be a data scientist, sure, but be committed. But what I think is more powerful instead is the accountant who is data savvy. Meaning to say, you understand the data tools, not just data savvy, tech savvy. You understand how the different tools affect the business, right? And yet, as an accountant, you understand the numbers. The combination of those 2, I think, is very powerful, right? So that's 1. 2 is, do you want to be a specialist or do you want to have a range of abilities? When I was growing up, people always say you are either a jack of all trades or a master of one, right? To me in the past, I used to think that master of one trade is always better, but the reality is in this day and age, things move so fast, things evolve so fast. If you find yourself only knowing one thing, there's a good chance you will not be relevant in 5 years' time, right? I'm not saying don't be very good at one thing. You can be very good at one thing, but you must also be good at quite a number of things as an accountant. That's how you rise above, right, and stay relevant, right? And another thing I find in younger accountants these days is they don't understand the business. They can be working in a business for so long, right? But you ask them a question about the business and they can't tell you, right? So I think the ability to think beyond, have business acumen, how the macroeconomic factors affect the business also helps an accountant. And then finally, really as an accountant, do you want to be a back office person or do you want to be a business partner? The most successful CFOs I see out there are those who have a seat at the table right next to the CEO. In fact, the most successful CFOs I see eventually become CEOs, right? Because they've always seen themselves as a business partner rather than just an accountant, right? So if you bear in mind these things, you will always be relevant. But there's one more thing I want to recap. As an accountant, why do I feel that we'll always be relevant? It's because of our purpose. So I'm an audit partner, right? So I sign audit reports. But is my purpose signing audit reports? You're a CFO maybe. You interpret results and you sign off on checks. Is that your purpose? No, your purpose is trust. You are there to deliver trust, right? You know, when your CEO turns to you as a CFO and say, are these numbers okay? And you say, okay, he is trusting you, right? And trust, friends, is an intangible thing. It's a human emotion. It can never be disrupted. So if you can rise above, you know, what's repeatable, what is low judgment, and remember that you are here to deliver trust, I think as an accountant, you'll always be relevant. All right, so that I feel is very important. All right, so then now that we are relevant, coming to the end, so a couple of more slides for me. Now that you're relevant, how do you then add value in this technological age, right? It's very important, whether you're in digitalization, or digital transformation, no matter how small or how big, you must plan. You must plan your digital journey. Don't jump the gun, right? I've sat in presentations, right, where the contractors come in with very nice, sexy-looking tools, and you're tempted to buy, you know, and you just buy. And after a while, it goes to waste because you didn't plan, right? And how to plan? Identify who is the most impacted by this technological change you're going to drive. Identify those people, understand their needs, and then map out their needs, right? And as a key starting point, clean your data sets, understand your data sets. Remember I talked about having piles and piles of documents in the room? I've heard of companies that, okay, I'm going to go and put all this into a soft copy. But after they do it, they lose track of it because they didn't plan. They just rushed. They rushed to digitize, right? So don't rush, right? People factor, very important. Huh? You're doing digital transformation, your people must buy into it, right? You must identify champions and you must involve them in your journey, right? If they don't buy into it, everything fails, right? And this is the part I talked about today earlier. Your junior accountants, equip them in the fundamentals of technology. They don't need to be specialists, but they need to understand. I went for a course the other time on technology and big data, and I thought it was all going to be junior people, startups at the course. But the reality is there were CFOs and all from big companies who were there, and they all said the same thing. They are lost, right? So if you are struggling, you're not alone. But it's important to equip your people. And let me give you an example why. So what happens in a lot of organizations, and I'll use big data as an example. You have someone at who's the data owner. He keys in the data in the system. And then you have this Alteryx, Power BI, whatever you put there to massage the data. You have a data scientist there every day making it look nice. And then puts it on a nice dashboard and gives it to the CFO and says, CFO, go and present at the board meeting. The CFO looks at it and says, I don't understand this. He goes to the guy who put in the numbers and asks him, hey, can you explain the numbers? And the guy says, hey, I also don't understand. I don't know what has happened to my numbers. And then the whole thing falls flat. Because there's not one person who understands the entire cycle from data entry to data visualization. And who can play that role best? Accountants. Right? If you are data savvy and you know the numbers, you can tell that story, right? So equip your people, very, very important. And of course, supplement with external resources if you need. Okay? Start small. Don't try to move mountains in a day, right? Low-hanging fruit. There are a lot of low-hanging fruit there, right? Just go with those first. Understand the outputs. When you have started, you have done a pilot run, there will be false positives. There will be a lot of errors. You may feel like giving up. Don't give up. Understand it, refine it, improve it, and then go from there. Act upon insights quickly and track outcomes. And who best to track outcomes other than accountants, right? No use spending $1 million on something that doesn't work, right? And then the last point, manage expectation gap. What I found, your audit committee members, your board members, they sit on a lot of boards, right? They go to one company and then suddenly they think that that company is very far ahead digitally. And they come and tell you also, hey, you also better follow them, you better call them and find out what they're doing. There was once that happened to me. So my audit committee chair told me, you call this company and ask them what's happening. So I called lah. And the guy said, hey, I'm also lost, right? So the reality is there is a big expectation gap. What senior management think and what is actually achievable. You need to manage. As accountants, you need to manage the gap, right? Keep them appraised of the progress and get their buy-in and then keep moving, right? All right, so that's comes to sort of the end of my presentation. I go one more slide, my closing thoughts. I feel accountancy remains a valuable profession. In fact, in this era, more so than ever, right? But to remain valuable ourselves, you need to rise above what is low judgment and what is repeatable, right? I spoke about how we can do that earlier. Technology can be an enabler, but don't rush into it. Plan properly, execute properly, right? This one, technology can paint you a picture, but who is going to tell the story behind the picture? Accountants, right? And to be able to tell the story, you need to understand business, you need to understand culture, you need to have judgment. I mean, using football as an example. For those who follow football, there is immense amount of technology in football these days. You finish one game, the player can find out how many meters he ran, how many passes he made, how many tackles he made, all because technology. There's a chip somewhere in the ball or the boot, who knows. But technology doesn't make Ronaldo a better player. It is training, it is dedication, it is effort, it is investment in time. Right? You have to be in the gym, you have to be constantly trying your free kicks. Technology can tell you, can help you, but ultimately it takes more than that to become a better player, right? So I think that's important. And my last point is always remember our purpose. Trust. Trust is a fundamental service offering. And that's why despite technology, crypto, ESG, whatever may come into the world, why accountants will always have a relevant role to play is because we are here to deliver trust, right? And that's it for me. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Navin. You're right on time.
I hope I didn't take too long.
I hope everyone agrees when Navin concluded to say that accountancy remains a valuable profession. And the other point that I think is important to note is accountants need to rise above what is repeatable and non-judgmental. Thank you for your thought. Our next speaker is Bapak Atanius from representing CPA Australia. Have your time and share your ideas to all of us. Stage is yours.
Selamat siang Bapak-Bapak, Ibu-Ibu. Izinkan saya present dalam bahasa campur-campur, Indonesia dan English ya. Tapi juga dalam bahasa teknikal. Jadi tujuan dari, mungkin nanti presentasinya bisa dibagikan ya Pak ya. Karena tujuan saya tulis presentasi ini benar-benar untuk membagikan edukasi. Jadi untuk dibaca setelahnya. Selamat siang untuk para anggota DPN, IAI dan manajemen eksekutif IAI. Ya, saya mewakili CPA Australia akan membicarakan satu hal yang sebenarnya sangat relevan. Sangat relevan kenapa? Karena kita semua, apalagi sebagai pemilik bisnis, apalagi sebagai akuntan, ya, tentu kita salah satu tujuan dari bisnis kita adalah make money. Ya. Cryptocurrency, misalnya ibu-ibu, bapak-bapak mendengar dari berita-berita itu memang sangat lukratif. Dalam 1-2 bulan mungkin portfolio bapak ibu, perusahaan ibu kalau misalnya investasi di cryptocurrency mungkin bisa naik 100% dalam 3 bulan. Tapi dalam satu hari mungkin bisa hilang ke 0 gitu ya. Jadi bagaimana kita men-treat sebagai akuntan, sebagai business owner. Jadi presentasi saya hari ini mencoba memperkenalkan mungkin kepada Bapak Ibu sekalian mengenai cryptocurrency ini tersebut ya. Jadi cryptocurrency itu adalah bagian dari digital asset. Digital asset itu adalah everything yang di-create menggunakan kriptografi, yaitu IT stuff lah ya, dan ditulis di dalam blockchain. Mungkin tadi Bapak ngelihat di presentasi Pak Navin ada blockchain, salah satu digitalization ya. Cryptocurrency itu adalah salah satu bentuk digitalisasi uang, bahkan ya. Mendigitalkan uang yang saat ini uangnya dalam bentuk kertas yang bisa kita pegang, nanti bentuknya bisa berbentuk digital yang kita tidak bisa pegang, apalagi kita kontrol ya. Jadi digital asset adalah it's a new class of assets. Tidak hanya cryptocurrency di dalamnya, ada juga mungkin Bapak Ibu pernah dengar NFT ya, itu ada lukisan-lukisan kayak lukisan anak TK ya, tapi harganya bisa $1 juta gitu. Jadi bagaimana itu? Apabila perusahaan kita bergerak di dalam NFT, bagaimana itu kita merecognize dan bagaimana kita mencatatkannya, gitu kan ya? Itu sangat menarik. Dan digital asset itu bisa dipakai dengan berbagai purpose. Tapi pada hari ini kita fokus kepada cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency itu bisa berfungsi untuk menjadi medium of exchange. Kita bisa sebenarnya bisa menjadi currency. Tapi di Indonesia cryptocurrency bukanlah legal tender, tidak direcognize sebagai legal tender ya. Karena juga itu cryptocurrency tidak di-issue oleh jurisdictional authority, tidak di-issue oleh central bank. Mungkin ibu-ibu, bapak-bapak pernah dengar atau nanti akan dengar ada CBDC ya, itu digital rupiah. Nah, itu effortnya dari pemerintah mungkin untuk membuat atau mendigitalkan rupiah ya. Standar dan regulasi. Saking cepatnya the world of crypto di dunia pergerakannya, perubahannya, belum ada standar saat ini ya. Jadi mungkin kita sebagai IAI kita rely ke FASB sama ada IFRIC ya, IFRS IC. Mereka sudah mengeluarkan decision bagaimana mengaplikasikan IFRS yang ada kepada kepemilikan cryptocurrency. Nanti akan ada pembahasan lebih detailnya. Nah, di Indonesia sendiri sudah ada 17,5 juta pelanggan atau investor ya yang terdaftar di Indonesia. Kita sudah ada crypto exchange. Ya, pemerintah sudah membuat crypto exchange dan ada 500 jenis kripto yang diperdagangkan. Kalau dulu kita suka bingung pakai USD, pakai IDR, pakai AUD gitu ya. Nah, sekarang ada 500 tipe aset yang mungkin bisa menjadi bagian dari pembukuan di suatu perusahaan if they wish to. Ya. Dan di Indonesia ada 30 pedagang aset kripto yang terdaftar di Bapepti. Nah, pengawasannya saat ini memang di bawah Bapepti di Indonesia ya. Tapi 2 tahun setelah Januari 2023 di mana keluarkan Undang-Undang P2SK itu OJK akan take over. Tapi sampai saat ini PP-nya belum keluar juga sih. Ya, tapi nanti akan diatur oleh OJK. Nah, peraturan-peraturan di Indonesia itu saya sudah catatkan ada sekitar 9. Kebanyakan memang peraturan dari Menteri Perdagangan, lalu ada beberapa dari peraturan Bapepti. Lalu ada peraturan Menteri Keuangan ya. Dan bahkan rasanya Indonesia salah satu yang pertama kita memfinalisasi perpajakan seputar cryptocurrency. Ya. Jadi perdagangannya sendiri itu sudah legal sebenarnya. Dan secara pajak sudah bisa dipelajari karena sudah ada aturannya. Ya, ini perusahaan-perusahaan kripto yang ada di Indonesia bisa dilihat sendiri. Nanti ini mekanismenya bisa dibaca mungkin sama Ibu dan Bapak ya di lain waktu. Saya mau membahas sedikit mungkin seputar accounting untuk crypto aset. Ya. Nah, di sini ada dua hal yang mau saya jelaskan. Satu adalah crypto asset holder. Apabila perusahaan saudara memiliki kripto dengan tujuan untuk berinvestasi, hanya untuk berinvestasi, maka perusahaan saudara adalah crypto asset holder atau Anda sendiri pribadi adalah crypto asset holder. Ya. Dan crypto asset holder itu tidak melakukan mining. Mining itu adalah pembuatan cryptocurrency baru. Ya, sedangkan crypto asset issuer adalah mungkin pernah dengar juga di China, di beberapa negara itu banyak sekali crypto mining. Nah, crypto mining itu di mana suatu cryptocurrency diciptakan. Ya, jadi itu treatmentnya juga berbeda apabila perusahaan Anda bergerak dalam crypto mining, yang which is berarti membuat sesuatu yang baru. Cryptocurrency itu benar-benar luas ya, dan memang will take time for us to understand. Nah, jadi kalau menurut IFRIC tergantung ke purpose dari perusahaan saudara itu memegang aset kripto, apakah itu untuk sebagai investasi ataukah untuk diperjualbelikan, maka AS2 dan PSAK 14 itu bisa ikut mengatur ya kalau itu diperjualbelikan sebagai inventory. Kalau tidak perjualbelikan hanya sebagai investasi, maka kita bisa rely sama PSAK 19 IAS 38 intangible assets. Nah, problemnya memang di dalam pencatatan, ya. Apalagi apabila perusahaan saudara bergerak di exchange, ya, di mana cryptocurrency itu diperjualbelikan. Memang saat menjualnya mudah karena ada harganya saat itu ya, ada harga market yang bisa kita cek. Tapi untuk akuntansi kan kita harus melihat ada gain atau loss-nya. Nah, gain atau loss-nya itu kan harus di-drive di harga waktu kita membeli. Nah, masalahnya memang cryptocurrency waktu dibeli itu bisa menggunakan US dollars, kebanyakan memang rate-nya US dollars, atau dengan menggunakan kripto lain. Nah, itu akan memberikan challenge tersendiri karena memang harus di-measure at cost. Nah, kalau Anda adalah suatu perusahaan yang bergerak di bidang exchange, apabila aset Anda ada 500 different assets dan jual beli cryptocurrency itu dalam hitungan detik dan dalam jumlahnya sangat luar biasa banyaknya. Apabila Anda sebagai crypto exchange tidak memiliki sistem yang bukan hanya mencatatkan salesnya, tapi juga mencatatkan dari sisi akuntansinya, maka it is very hard sampai saat ini untuk melakukan audit atau melakukan pencatatan terhadap pergerakan cryptocurrency tersebut karena jumlahnya sangat-sangat besar. Jumlahnya sangat-sangat besar. Ya. waktu saat disclosure pun itu sebagai akuntan, apabila kita mau mendisclose, apabila kita punya banyak aset cryptocurrency, karena cryptocurrency harganya, value-nya berubah setiap detik. Ya. Jadi bisa dibayangkan nanti waktu kita disclose di financial statement kita, value-nya pas kapan, gitu kan? Nah itu adalah challenges dalam presentation dan disclosure of crypto assets. Oke. Ya. Nah, ini bisa saya ada 3 halaman accounting and auditing issues. Ya, karena ini juga baru di Indonesia, juga belum banyak yang properly mengaudit atau mengaccount untuk cryptocurrency. Itu ada banyak hal yang bisa mempengaruhi value, bisa mempengaruhi pencatatannya. Ya. Apakah karena cryptocurrency itu bisa dijual belikannya bukan hanya di crypto exchange Indonesia misalnya, bisa juga dijual belikan di crypto exchange di luar negeri, ya, karena digital kan nggak ada batasnya, ya. Dan bisa juga dijual belikannya di dalam blockchain itu sendiri. Jadi ya itu again more technical, tapi itu hanya menunjukkan yes, cryptocurrency itu lukratif untuk bisnis, sangat lukratif untuk aset investasi, sangat lukratif apabila Anda tahu bagaimana how the market works. Tapi memang it presents challenge ya untuk para akuntan dalam mencatatkan dan melaporkannya, apalagi untuk para auditor untuk mengauditnya. Mungkin seperti itu dulu saat ini, biar tidak terlalu panjang dan tidak terlalu teknikal. Terima kasih atas perhatiannya.
Karena pakai bahasa Indonesia, kita berikan tepuk tangan buat Pak. Tapi sebelum geser ke sebelah sana, karena saya juga tertarik karena invest di kripto juga gitu ya, yang mana tadi sudah disampaikan sangat berisiko. Perusahaan juga kelihatannya ada yang udah beli-beli gitu kan buat investment. Kalau saham kan dia listed di stock exchange, di bursa ada harga pasar, di New York juga ada. Cryptocurrency mungkin ada di beberapa exchange, betul ya. Tapi kan karena teknologi dia saling cross check, nggak mungkin bedanya terlalu jauh. Nanti Pak Tanu pilih yang mana exchange-nya?
Betul. Jadi ada approach-nya tersendiri tuh Pak, seperti itu. Karena bisa diperjualbelikan di banyak tempat dan harganya pun berbeda, dan perusahaan Bapak dan Ibu mungkin bisa memperoleh profit dalam memperdagangkan difference-nya itu. Sangat menarik memang Pak.
Menarik sekali. Bayangkan kalau saham itu tutup perdagangan jam berapa biasanya? Jam 5?
5.
Ya. Kalau ini nggak tutup-tutup.
Nggak pernah tutup Pak.
Saya pantau terus, jadi Pak Tanu pakai posisi jam 23.59.
23.59 Indonesia, Bali. Gitu
So
ya.
welcome to market value ya. Terima kasih Pak Tanu.
Makasih.
Dan teman-teman, ini juga sekaligus berarti merevolusi cara kita mencatat ya. Next, also very interesting as a speaker. Sorry, I have to skip Pak Flo. Nanti yours I will retain for the last. Andrew from ACCA. Stage is yours. Give applause.
So while waiting for the slides, ya, terima kasih Pak Isnani. Selamat siang Bapak Ibu semua. Please allow me to use English. I'm a Malaysian, so my bahasa still in work in progress. So please apology that I'll use English for my presentation. Maybe just to begin with, allow me to have a brief introduction of myself. My name is Andrew. I'm currently the director and a CFO of PT Tunas Ridean, which is actually a leading independent automotive dealer group in Indonesia. We operate a network of sales and after-sales network. After that, we also do providing corporate mobility solutions, for example, car fleet rental to corporates. And last but not least, also through a joint venture with Bank Mandiri, we're also operating in the automotive financing realm through what we call a Mandiri Tunas Finance. So in my current role as the CFO, I do not only just responsible for the accounting and finance, tax and and treasury, but I also oversee the functions for IT, risk management, and internal audit, as well as transformation. So I do hope that today, with my experience, I will be able to share a bit of insight that could be beneficial to everyone today. So today, my presentations are largely premised on a thought leadership from ACCA. So I think it's a report called what we call a Digital Horizon. It's an outcome of a survey across about 1,000 over global memberships of ACCA across many sectors and regions. So I think it contains a lot of nuggets of insight relating to these topics today. So I think if at the end of the day today, if Baba Ibu is interested in finding this material helpful, you can actually go to ACCA website to download the material via accaglobal.com. So I think the report will cover a few things, trying to do 3 distinctive objectives. The first is really trying to understand the evolving technologies in current days. It touches on various technologies like what Pak Navin mentioned about the IoT, the blockchain, the big data, last but not least also the artificial intelligence. Secondly, it also tried to explore, took a deeper dive into AI, which is I think everyone is very interested in nowadays because it's such a hype in this technology of artificial intelligence. Last but not least, the report also covers new opportunities and also the new skills of the workforce today, what we should have to become more future-proof for the future, right? So let's jump straight in. I think if we talk about the evolving technology, there are myriads of technology ranging from AI, big data, digital technologies, automations, IoT. But specifically in recent years, you can see that the IoT, in terms of activity, actually declined. But mainly this, I think, is a reflective of the level of maturity of the technology. It also a reflective of the current state of the challenges that the IoT has in terms of scalability and also for cost. But nonetheless, IoT remain a crucial technology for our future technological front. Other than IoT, I think the big one we talk about on the screen here is the AI and the big data. Obviously, we have seen significant investment being plowed into this area. In fact, based on certain reports, the global AI market currently in this year, 2023, ranging about $500 billion US. It could grow very quickly to about 2 trillion market size in 2030. So I think there's a huge significant focus in this technology that we're talking about today. So this new kids on the block, generative AI, what is this technology? You talk about AI, we talk about generative AI. So in general, this generative AI is actually an advanced machine learning that combined with 2 critical features. The first features is actually the ability to process natural language at the back end. So what it means is that you're able to process, analyze data, at the same time be able to interpret prompts. And second features is that you're able to produce generative output. So at the back end, in the front end, you're able to produce content output, such as text, visual, and audio data. I think this is the function that actually makes ChatGPT, OpenAI so popular because of the applicability. So I think, look at the screen here. OpenAI ChatGPT is by far the fastest growing technology. What took, on the screen you can see, what took Netflix about 1,000 over days to reach a user of 1 million. It only took ChatGPT or OpenAI only 5 days. There's a significant speed in that development of that growth in the technology. I think this owes much to the level of maturity of the technology, the ease of use, as mentioned, because of the output through audio, through visual, and also through text. And also, last but not least, is also the potential applicability. So I think overall, AI will have varying implications for business, for accountancy and finance and professionals in the future. But again, one a lot of the applications in the AI area now doesn't have direct, not many have direct impact on the accountancy field. But nonetheless, even if the indirect impact on the accountancy field is significant, say for example, AI now can actually support a lot on the software development. Yeah. Our IT team now can leverage on AI to do programming much quicker than before. Yeah, they can develop a software. But who uses this software? It's us accountants. It's us as a finance professional that interact with this system. So that's where it poses the both interesting facts as well as challenges of how AI is being used today. Some real-life example in the world of how we use AI in accountancy and professional finance professionals are, for example, this text GPT. So in fact, OpenAI have actually embedded a specialized module called the text GPT in its chatbot. So it was being trained with the intricacies of US tax laws. Apparently, it able to demonstrate a very high proficiency in handling tax queries, as well as also generate data for tax return. So I think there's applicability even in the accountancy and tax arena currently. Last but not least, we can see a lot of big fours are plowing billions of dollars into this area to enhance the audit and tax offerings in their services to the customers as well. So overall, I think we can see that there are three positions of a potential value of AI. You can see from the left-hand side, ranging from efficiency, ranging to the right-hand side, more towards a strategic approach. Obviously, obvious advantage of AI is actually automating, gaining the efficiency. So we're looking at thinking in terms of efficiency, but not changing the ways we work. But then moving from just being faster and efficient, we move to the centerpiece, whereby we talk about enhancing insight, tailoring services, focus on decision making. And this is a part where we find ourselves as a finance professionals having a lot of our mundane heavy lifting being automated by AI or machine learning. Then what do we do with our time? We then focus on business partnering, a more strategic approach in the way we carry our work. And that brings forth the need of better soft skills, such as communication skill, networking, collaborating, as well as the influencing skills. Towards the far right, it's more strategic. It's in fact even to challenging the model itself, because as AI, as such technology becomes developed and more efficient, I think the demand on us as a financial professional will be even more. Yeah, the acceleration of your business growth will be more. And in turn, the demand on us as a finance professional will be more as well. So in fact, of do less, we are likely to be expected to do more, but differently. So we need to change the way we work. In fact, reconstruct some of our tasks through AI as well. But again, the adoptions of AI or various technology always comes with certain risks. Yeah, and we as a financial professionals or even our risk managers are well positioned in terms of how we ensure the adoptions of AI would be both ethical and as well as effective in achieving our organizational goal. So on the screen here, you can see there's a 5-pillar surrounding AI literacy. The first one is strategic vision. So adoptions of AI should not just for the sake of adopting. It's a hype that we therefore invest money into it. It has to be linked with our organizational goal. If it doesn't achieve our organizational objective or goals, why invest into it, right? So I think as a financial professional, we need to be able to understand what our organizational vision is, our objective, what are we trying to achieve, and be able to understand whether the AI technology are able to help us to arrive at that goal. So alignment of that strategic objective is important. Secondly, it's about people and culture. So we as finance professionals, we should be able to create this culture, a transparency where we be able to share best practices, not just within our department, but across functions, in a way how we best use AI to best serve our corporate objective. The third one will be interesting, the risk and compliance, because as you all know, the AI, in a way, technology is still nascent. Yeah, it leverages on the big data itself at the back end, but nonetheless, it is so prone to produce incorrect information, data, could be also misleading and biased answers to some of the questions itself. So as a user, as a finance professional, we have responsibility to understand how the AI works, yeah, and be able to validate the data, the output, before really relying on it. Because once you make a decision on that data, then hard to say that you're able to reverse the trend, right? So I think from the risk and compliance perspective, there should be guidelines to be issued to users. How do we use AI? Yeah. So with regards to risk itself, is other than that, AI also potentially could leverage on third-party intellectual property. So you do not want to rely on the output whereby it infringes on the third-party rights as well. And the fourth one is investment financing. Because it's so new, everyone is still experimenting it. So there's some flexibility in terms of financing, how we look at the return. So be able to have courage to explore, to experiment at the same time. But nonetheless, we hold ourselves accountable to get the return. Last but not least is also data governance. Obviously, in this year in Indonesia, the data privacy will be affected next year by October. So again, data governance again will be very crucial. So again, what would it mean? I think just now Pak Naveen had mentioned, is it a yes or no? Whether will AI displace accountancy and finance job? I have to agree with Pak Naveen, it's a yes and no. Yeah. It really depends how you look at it. Well, accountancy is by far the longest professions in the world. Yeah, from days of abacus to calculator to Excel, and now we talk about ERP, budgeting tools, and now AI. So I think we will continue to evolve as a profession. But the main key here is how do we make ourselves continue to be relevant. So it's actually very crucial for the workforce today to be able to adapt and acquire new skills to remain relevant in this changing technological landscape. So how will AI affect our jobs today? There are 4 points here. The first one is adoption of AI. Well, we're afraid that we'll lose our job. It will decrease the importance of our work. But on the flip side, it actually increases the importance of us as being an expert. As mentioned, the adoption of AI poses risk. Yeah. So it's very critical for us to be able to understand what are the critical processes in the business that we can automate or should not automate. Secondly, AI will not be able to replace the critical thinking that we need as an organization. It can automate many mundane tasks, it can automate a lot of repetitive jobs, but in terms of the critical thinking part, it still remains as us an individual. So say for example, this thing during crisis management, or even during COVID, the past 2 years, will we be able to comfortably rely on AI to make decisions for the company? I think the answer would be no. It requires a lot of judgment, requires a lot of us taking into various of information, contextual factors to make decisions for the company, for employees. The third point is judgment. I think Pak Naveen also mentioned on judgment, so this is the key. Some tasks can be automated. Even though they can be automated, should they be automated? In the aviation industry, autopilot has been there for a long, long time. But the pilots do not use autopilot when taking off or landing. In the middle, they use autopilot. So again, coming back to here, judgment is key. Last but not least, different organizations have different appetite in terms of adopting technology, including AI. So they will have to find the balance. And again, finding this balance, it's also required judgment. So then how do we make ourselves more future-proof then? What kind of skills that are required for the future? I think the key here, the first one here is about data literacy. Data literacy is trying to understand what data is relevant, how can it add value, and how can it inform or shape the decision that we make in the organization. So I think relating to data literacy in Tunas region, we're also trying to make in the next year that data analytics become one of the core competency for our managers up. So this is something that we want them to have, including coupled with the business acumen. I think this is one area that we want to move, shifting our finance role from not just a bean counter, but towards more of a strategic business partner role. Secondly, how the skills that we need for the future would be not just to understand how AI works. Finance professional, we don't need to be the experts for programming. We don't need to be the expert because we have other people that can do in the IT, in the digital function. But nonetheless, for the basics, we should know the basics of how AI works and what it can, what it can't. We need to know the capability and the limitations of AI. Because again, backtrack to just now, the strategic objective. We need to be able to make sure that AI meet the requirement or the objective, strategic objective of the organization. If the AI can't do it, it will not meet our requirement. And last but not least, I'll leave the last, the skills is actually analytical and communication skills. As we professionals begin to move towards the business partnering role, so the expectation is for us to use the output, the data from AI to best serve the organization through business partnering, better informed decision making. So we need to be able to translate complex data and process it into simple and reliable insights. So I think that's all from my presentation today. I hope that it gives everyone some insight in terms of how OpenAI or rather AI impacts on our profession today. Ya, terima kasih Bapak Ibu.
Thank you Andrew for being on time. Bapak Ibu tadi dijelaskan ChatGPT hanya butuh waktu 5 hari untuk mencapai 1 juta customer. Just 5 days, betul ya? Pertanyaannya, kita sudah benar-benar pakai nggak ini ChatGPT? Dipakai untuk apa? Jadi mudah-mudahan kita semua tergugah ya untuk memanfaatkan this technology. Thank you for sharing this generative AI. One of the example is the ChatGPT. Last but not least, Pak Flo panggilannya represent SIMA. Stage is yours. Give applause, audience.
Selamat pagi Bapak Ibu, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sehat untuk kita semua. Jadi di sesi saya juga akan melakukan dalam bahasa Indonesia karena hari ini adalah HUT IAI, Ikatan Akuntan Indonesia, jadi saya akan bicara dalam bahasa Indonesia. Oke, Bapak Ibu, izin memperkenalkan diri Bapak Ibu. Jadi saya Florentino Suryo Susilo, biasa dipanggil Flo. Saya keseharian sebagai Director di Deloitte Consulting Southeast Asia. Jadi memang saya di Deloitte sendiri, saya di orang industri, yaitu di energy resources and industrial. Jadi ketika saya menerima TOR dari IAI, saya lihat wah ini kaitannya dengan decarbonization, sustainability atau digitalization gitu. Itu maka saya dengan hati saya mungkin sharing apa point of view kami atau topik-topik yang mungkin akan relevan, yang mungkin akan saat ini sebenarnya mungkin di Indonesia kita masih belum gitu ya. Karena masih beberapa tahun sudah mulai tapi mungkin masih belum benar-benar saat ini sudah dilakukan gitu ya. Jadi kenapa saya sebutnya accountant is business? Karena dalam sesi saya akan memaparkan tentang bagaimana kemampuan apa yang harus di-equip oleh seorang financial leader dalam menghadapi sustainability issue yang saat ini memang sudah mau tidak mau harus diantisipasi. Bapak Ibu, jadi saat ini kita paham bahwa dunia memang kalau kita bicara secara global, bahwa dunia memang dalam situasi yang cukup kritikal ya, cukup kritikal kalau kita lihat bahwa karbon emisi dari tahun ke tahun selalu menaik ya, dan kita melihat apa itu efek gas rumah kaca, dan tentunya kalau kita lihat bahwa dengan naiknya suhu temperatur dunia temperatur global, maka tentunya ini akan berakibat terhadap situasi alam yang menjadi makin tidak jelas, makin tidak bagus, dan tentunya itu adalah makanya suatu alarm buat kita semua, buat dunia, bagaimana mengantisipasi ini, termasuk dunia bisnis juga harus mengantisipasi. Dimana kalau kita lihat bahwa bagaimana level dari emisi karbon di global ya, kalau kita lihat bahwa memang mayoritas itu dihasilkan oleh dihasilkan oleh beberapa sektor ya, terutama katanya nomor paling besar adalah di batu bara ya, kekuatan batu bara. Terus habis itu kita lihat di industri itu juga cukup besar, transport ya. Tentunya habis itu kalau kita lihat di building ya, building kita menggunakan AC dan lain itu juga menyumbang emisi yang sangat besar. Dan tentunya adalah akibat dari emisi tersebut, maka bagusnya adalah saat ini dunia sedang bahu-membahu bagaimana cara menurunkan emisi tersebut. Kalau kita lihat bahwa di beberapa negara seperti Australia atau Jepang, New Zealand atau di Amerika atau Eropa itu banyak sekali inisiatif bagaimana supaya masalah iklim ini bisa terselesaikan dengan baik ya. Termasuk di dalam hal ini adalah bahu-membahu antar pemerintah, dunia bisnis, tentunya adalah masyarakat. Bagaimana dengan di Indonesia? Di Indonesia kita mempunyai beberapa topik utama. Pertama adalah decarbonization target ya. Jadi kalau kita lihat bahwa Pak Jokowi mempunyai target bahwa untuk menurunkan menjadi emisi ini menjadi 29% di tahun 2030 ya. Kemudian juga implementasi carbon tax. Saat ini kita masih belum tahu kapan gitu. Masih ada discussion. Kemudian renewable energy mix target. Jadi bahwa pemerintah dari waktu ke waktu memang mempunyai target untuk meningkatkan energy mix dari yang sebelumnya itu adalah menggunakan fosil, itu akan di-encourage lagi untuk menggunakan renewable energy. Baik itu dari apakah kalau kita bicara listrik, kita bicara geothermal, ataukah kita bicara mobil listrik misalkan gitu ya. Itu adalah energy mix yang diharapkan akan bisa berpartisipasi dalam mengurangi tingkat polusi atau tingkat emisi ya. Dan tentunya adalah kalau kita bicara adanya insentif untuk rooftop solar panel itu juga saat ini memang sudah masuk di pipeline juga. Dan diharapkan bahwa keempat topik ini akan bisa membantu atau membuat Indonesia bisa berkontribusi dalam menurunkan tingkat emisi. Kalau kita lihat di sini bahwa secara detail bahwa pemerintah dari Pak Jokowi kami lihat memang sangat serius untuk berpartisipasi dalam penurunan emisi karbon ini. Kalau kita lihat bahwa saat di tahun 2025 misalkan ditargetkan kontribusi dari coal itu energi itu 73% dan diharapkan di 2038 itu menjadi 47%. Kita paham bahwa coal ini adalah salah satu kontributor besar dalam emisi. Kemarin di Jakarta kan sempat terjadi perdebatan gitu ya. Pagi-pagi buka jendela kenapa sepertinya gelap banget. Itu katanya di Muara Karang gitu. Nah, itu kan boleh dibilang itu juga karena dari coal juga. Dari pembakaran batu bara. Sehingga kalau kita lihat bahwa memang pemerintah sendiri mempunyai target yang seharusnya realistis. Kalau kita lihat dari kacamata bisnis, seharusnya cukup realistis dan kami lihat cukup serius untuk membantu penurunan emisi ini. Bapak Ibu, namun demikian bahwa kita pahami bahwa penurunan emisi atau sustainability bukanlah tanggung jawab dari pemerintah semata. Kalau kita clustering bahwa ada 4 kira-kira key driver yang siapa yang harus berpartisipasi. Pertama adalah tentunya kalau kita lihat tentunya customer ya. Customer ini sebenarnya juga mempunyai peranan yang luar biasa. Artinya meskipun pemerintah mempunyai target, tetapi ketika dalam eksekusi itu tidak didukung oleh 4 pilar ini, maka tentunya akan sangat susah sekali. Pertama adalah customer ya, tentunya customer, employee, dan commodity demands. Dalam arti ini adalah bahwa kalau kita melihat produk-produk itu kan ada kan yang kategori, kalau di Eropa itu ada kategori yang ini green apa enggak gitu ya. Nah itu mungkin customer juga sudah meng-encourage itu. Mereka cuma akan membeli produk yang sifatnya adalah green misalkan. Apabila produk itu tidak green, mereka tidak akan beli, kita tidak akan beli. Dengan demikian maka itu akan menciptakan habit kita terhadap ini terhadap green, sesuatu yang green gitu ya. Dan yang kedua adalah policy and government target. Tentunya ini adalah bahwa pemerintah mempunyai peran yang sangat besar, mempunyai target dan juga mempunyai policy gitu ya. Misalkan kalau pemerintah mempunyai target untuk meningkatkan mobil listrik tentunya, maka tentunya harus diberikan support misalkan masalah keringanan pajak ataupun hal yang lain-lain ya, itu harus disupport di situ. Jadi tidak mungkin masyarakat itu akan voluntary shifting dari sesuatu yang sudah biasa dilakukan menjadi sesuatu yang baru tanpa kalau adanya suatu insentif. Dan ini dalam hal ini adalah policy dan dalam hal ini adalah government ini mempunyai role yang sangat besar. Dan yang ketiga adalah investor pressure. Jadi investor ini sudah harus mulai pilih-pilih gitu ya. Kalau kami biasanya ada yang namanya adalah kita misalkan green fund, green bonds gitu. Itu sudah mulai mulai ada di market. Jadi artinya adalah bahwa dari investor sendiri sudah mulai pilih-pilih ketika mereka mau invest terhadap satu bisnis, maka mereka akan memulai memilih-milah mana-mana investasi yang sifatnya adalah green ataupun enggak green gitu ya. Dan yang ketiga adalah masalah teknologi. Teknologi ini menjadi penting karena teknologi saat ini masih sangat mahal. Isunya adalah sangat mahal. Kalau kita lihat bicara mobil listrik yang paling gampang, kita lihat Hyundai mungkin saat ini 850 juta masih gitu ya. Mungkin itu masih cukup mahal. Mungkin price point-nya adalah mungkin kalau bisa sampai ke 300, 400 mungkin itu orang akan banyak beralih ke mobil listrik. Jadi teknologinya ini masih mahal. Dan saat ini memang masih banyak banyak dilakukan penelitian-penelitian supaya teknologi supaya menjadi green ini akan menjadi bisa lebih murah dan terjangkau. Jadi artinya kerjasama dari keempat key driver ini itu adalah mutlak apabila memang ingin mencapai penurunan karbon emisi ya, Saya akan mengerucut ke masalah carbon market ya, masalah carbon market. Jadi kalau kita pahami bahwa kita bicara sustainability tadi, maka sebenarnya akan ada beberapa pilihan yang bisa dilakukan oleh bisnis dalam membantu penurunan karbon gitu ya, penurunan emisi gitu. Jadi pertama adalah bahwa pada dasarnya mereka bisa saja perusahaan atau bisnis itu melakukan penurunan emisi dengan melakukan suatu investasi yang green. Tetapi kadang-kadang investasi tersebut adalah sifatnya mahal. Maka salah satu cara adalah tentunya melalui carbon market. Jadi adanya suatu izin gitu ya. Jadi carbon market kita bicara karbon itu adalah kita bicara izin yang bisa diperjualbelikan. Jadi ada satu company yang memang dia over supply untuk untuk sesuatu yang sifatnya green, sertifikat untuk green, maka bisa dikompensate oleh satu perusahaan yang dia tidak punya izinnya. Sehingga ketika ditemu tengah-tengah itu akan menjadi suatu transaksi bisnis itu. Jadi kalau kita lihat bahwa banyak sekali sudah banyak secara global sudah banyak inisiatif yang dilakukan oleh perusahaan-perusahaan besar ya. Bagaimana seperti kita lihat Starbucks atau Apple atau Goldman Sachs itu pun juga banyak melakukan aktivitas mengurangi carbon print. Jadi kalau kita lihat bahwa saya mohon maaf agak sedikit teknis di sini detailnya bahwa bagaimana karbon kredit itu bisa apabila karbon kredit flow dari karbon kredit ini. Jadi kalau kita lihat dari greenhouse gases terus nanti akan sampai ke satu step di mana makhluk hidup itu perlu menurunkan kadar dari karbonnya atau karbon emisinya, dan pada akhirnya nanti karbon ini akan dibuat satu semacam karbon kredit gitu ya, namanya karbon kredit semacam izin, dan nanti akan bertemu di sini di satu voluntary market atau kemudian di sifatnya compliance market. Kalau kita paham bahwa bulan September kemarin Pak Jokowi meresmikan bursa karbon gitu ya, itu masih voluntary. Jadi sifatnya cap and trade, bahwa ada batasan-batasan itu masih belum dilakukan di Indonesia. Jadi sifatnya adalah masih voluntary. Dan kalau karena kalau compliance, sifatnya compliance itu memang benar-benar sudah harus apabila tidak memenuhi batas tertentu dari dari carbon footprint, maka itu akan ada satu punishment. Dan ini sifatnya masih di Indonesia sifatnya adalah masih voluntary. Kira-kira sampai kapan kita tidak tahu. Sifatnya masih tarik menarik di sini tentunya. Kalau kita bicara carbon tax-nya pun juga sama gitu ya. Itu pun juga sepertinya masih ditunda juga. Bahkan kalau kita lihat di bursa karbon, playernya juga masih masih project-projectnya PLN-nya PLN sama geothermalnya Pertamina di situ masih gitu. Jadi masih belum banyak di sana. Tapi paling enggak itu sudah suatu inisiatif yang menurut kami cukup serius dari pemerintah. Nah, jadi sedikit teknis juga bahwa ketika carbon footprint tadi itu dipertemukan itu bisa dalam bentuk insetting ataupun memang diperjualbelikan seperti yang kami sampaikan di sana. Kalau kita lihat bahwa market karbon pun saat ini masih sangat besar ya. Kalau kita lihat bahwa kita perkirakan sampai tahun 2021 ya, untuk yang barunya masih belum ini, diperkirakan itu sekitar 225 sampai 250 miliar dolar ini size bisnisnya. Jadi artinya sifatnya emisi pun masih bisa masih bisa disiasati dengan cara yaitu dengan melalui carbon trading. Jadi perusahaan tidak harus melakukan investasi yang benar-benar sifatnya green, tetapi dengan melakukan masuk ke bursa karbon pun itu akan bisa membantu dalam menurunkan emisi. Sekarang pertanyaannya adalah sesuai dengan judulnya adalah accountant in business. Tadi sebelumnya kita bicara bisnis, sekarang kita bicara bagaimana kita ke finance-nya gitu ya. Jadi kalau kita bicara tentang CFO level gitu ya. CFO level itu sebenarnya ada kita menyebutnya adalah 4 phases of the CFO gitu. Jadi adalah CFO itu sebagai operator yang sifatnya adalah ensuring the scale, quality gitu ya, efficiency, finance gitu. Kemudian steward, management compliance, control system. Yang keempat adalah strategis. Jadi kita bicara CFO yang setting strategic goals, making decision dan lain-lain gitu. Yang keempat adalah implementing strategy and control. Nah, ini adalah 4 phases of the CFO dan di sini tentunya dengan karakter dari CFO di perusahaan Bapak Ibu, maka perlu kira-kira mungkin direfleksikan. Namun demikian bahwa karbon ini pada akhirnya apapun akan dalam bentuk apapun pasti harus sesuatu yang harus dipelajari dan harus juga diimplementasikan dalam perusahaan di mana tentunya perlunya upskilling skill terhadap sustainability ya. Jadi dalam artian misalkan kita bicara ESG misalkan tentunya itu harus kaitannya dengan sustainability, tentunya perlu upskilling dan tentunya kalau kita bicara tentang masalah carbon credit tentunya pada akhirnya ketika jual beli itu perang dari akuntan itu sangat besar sekali untuk menghitungnya itu berapa sebenarnya sisanya gitu ya, berapa yang bisa dikonvert, berapa yang harus dijual belikan itu peran dari akuntan untuk menghitung itu sangat besar situ. Ketika kita bicara upscaling, dari SIMA mempunyai empat layer gitu ya. SIMA mempunyai 4 layer finance function gitu. Jadi pertama adalah kalau di paling bawah itu role dari finance itu adalah managing proses, kemudian di atasnya adalah technical specialist dan keempat adalah strategic partnership gitu ya. Dan keempat adalah strategic leadership. Nah di 4 layering ini dengan untuk mengantisipasi sustainability issue, tentunya seorang finance atau seorang accountant itu harus mengequip dirinya supaya bisa berkontribusi dalam menurunkan karbon ya, dalam menurunkan karbon emisi, karena bagaimanapun nanti ketika seperti saya sampaikan bahwa penurunan emisi itu bisa melalui beberapa cara, salah satunya adalah di bursa karbon, dan disinilah role seorang accountant atau role seorang finance dalam menentukan ini berapa karbon yang harus dikonversi, berapa karbon yang harus dijual begitu. Jadi saya pikir perlu dari seorang accountant itu tidak, sesuai topik accountant in business, seorang accountant itu tidak cuman berbicara tentang accounting standard dan lain-lain, tetapi belajar bisnis dan bagaimana mengantisipasinya dalam kehidupan sehari-hari seorang finance atau accountant itu harus dilakukan gitu ya. Mungkin demikian dari kami. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Pak Flo. Before I pass to the floor, Pak Flo, I have a question very specific. Many commitment they make is just on the 2030. Kayaknya generasi muda nggak sabar. Net zero-nya kok lama banget, nanti keburu dunia makin panas. Apa sih yang menghambat dia menjadi demikian lama untuk bisa mencapai net zero? Bapak expertnya mungkin bisa sharing kenapa demikian lama untuk mencapai net zero dan apa yang bisa accelerate that commitment.
Untuk ya memang itu isunya sepertinya ya. Jadi saya pikir untuk accelerate itu memang nomor satu memang pada dasarnya harus ada harus ada satu push mungkin sebenarnya ya dari government. Karena bagaimanapun kadang apalagi kalau kita bicara, kita tidak perlu bicara di global, di Indonesia itu kalau tidak ada yang sifatnya harus dipaksakan, itu akan susah. Orang akan susah menjadi voluntary. Jadi memang harus peraturan itu memang harus segera dikeluarkan, karena biasanya memang untuk keluar peraturan itu terjadi selalu tarik menarik politik selalu di bawahnya gitu ya, dan itu memang sesuatu tentunya dalam hal ini semua stakeholders harus mempunyai kacamata kepentingan yang bersama, tentunya dalam hal ini adalah penurunan karbon emisi. Saya setuju dengan Pak Esna ini bahwa sebaiknya kalau 2030 ini kalau bisa dipercepat lah gitu ya, karena takutnya dunia semakin panas. Jadi memang dari pemerintah itu memang harus segera mengeluarkan peraturan ya, tentunya adalah juga sifatnya edukasi yang bahwa pentingnya ini ada 4 pilar tadi, edukasi dari semua user itu harus dilakukan juga oleh semua pihak juga gitu. Tapi paling penting adalah dari pemerintah, baik sifatnya adalah peraturan atau sifatnya insentif itu.
Terima kasih Pak Florentius. Saya selalu senang kalau mendengar paparan tentang sustainability. Karena biasanya generasi yang lebih muda jadi sayang sama kita. Karena kita care sama mereka. Jadi kita banyak bicara tentang hal ini ya. Jadi accountant punya responsibility. Audience, now is the time for you to raise question and just feel free to raise your hand. We are still having a lot of time. I think about 25 minutes. Let me collect first ya. 1, 2, sebelah kanan ada? Ada, 3 ada, sama 2 ya. Oh 3, Bapak yang udah berdiri pakai mikrofon, udah tanggung basah, silakan langsung speak.
Terima kasih. Nama saya Sasongko Wisnu Broto dari Jakarta, Pak. Mau menanyakan mengenai tadi aset kripto. Misalnya kita punya dana, kita simpen di aset kripto atau di falas. Terus mana yang lebih berisiko? Kalau menurut saya kripto itu kan risikonya tinggi. Menurut pandangan Bapak kan ada saham, ada falas. Terus sekarang ada lagi kripto, Pak. Terus bagaimana menurut analisis Bapak untung ruginya dan risiko kalau kita menanamkan jual beli kripto dibandingkan dengan falas atau apa gitu. Terus yang kedua mengenai emisi. Sekarang kan lagi digencarkan pakai kendaraan listrik, Pak. Apakah nggak dipikirkan untung ruginya, Pak? Karena mobil listrik itu menghasilkan limbah juga. Baterainya itu nanti kan pasti, apalagi orang kita terkenal nggak disiplin lah. Nanti apakah jadi limbah itu di kemudian kalau nggak bisa, kan nggak bisa diperbaikin itu, Pak, limbah baterai. Belum lagi untuk bikin baterai itu bahan bakunya perlu ditambang juga, Pak. Itu pencemaran juga, Pak. Apalagi kalau kita bandingkan dengan mobil hibrida, itu mungkin lebih pas lah. Apalagi kelihatannya kok terlalu dipaksakan, untung ruginya apa nggak dikalkulasi dengan tepat. Karena masih mengenai bahan bakunya untuk bikin baterai itu juga itu pencemaran juga itu, Pak. Terima kasih.
I think the first question goes to Pak Tano, the second question to Pak Flo ya.
Oke, terima kasih Bapak. Mungkin dalam decision untuk investasi lebih baik memang di suatu perusahaan itu mungkin ada investment panel gitu ya. Tentu dalam berinvestasi kita harus ada portfolio, mungkin ada portfolio yang high risk, ada portfolio yang medium risk, ada portfolio yang very high risk atau sangat-sangat low risk gitu ya. Tentu crypto falls into the very high risk gitu. Bahkan kalau saya baca narasi-narasi mungkin hanya sekitar 10% dari aset itu dia sudah sangat banyak ya untuk suatu perusahaan mencoba investasi di kripto. Tapi tentu rewardnya juga besar kalau memang memiliki orang-orang yang mengerti bagaimana market kripto itu bekerja. Mungkin seperti itu ya. Saya tidak menganjurkan 100% aset perusahaan masuk ke kripto. Nah itu sangat tidak bertanggung jawab menurut saya. Karena memang kripto itu ada siklus biasanya siklus 4 tahun. Dalam siklus itu 3 tahun mungkin kriptonya itu hancur banget harganya. Tapi dalam 1 tahun terakhir bisa naik dengan cepat dan dalam 1 minggu, 2 minggu atau 1 bulan, 2 bulan bisa kembali hancur lagi. Jadi memang hanya harus bisa mengerti pergerakan market kripto untuk terjun ke sana. Terima kasih.
Thank you Pak. Silakan Pak Flo.
Oke. Baik, terima kasih Pak Isnani. Mohon izin Pak, memang yang Bapak sampaikan tadi itu akurat Pak. Jadi memang kadang-kadang tetapi gini, renewable energy mix itu tidak semata-mata cuman karena mobil listrik aja gitu ya. Jadi kalau kita bicara tentang misalkan kita bicara aktivitas-aktivitas lain pun itu tidak cuma terbatas pada penggunaan mobil listrik. Jadi bisa aja misalkan kita bicara listrik yang saat ini misalkan dikelola oleh PLN saat ini menggunakan batu bara, tetapi sebenarnya kan bisa juga misalkan di-push menggunakan geothermal misalkan gitu ya. Itu juga salah satu contoh aja gitu ya. Meskipun itu juga teknologinya memang juga tentunya masih mahal juga. Terus yang kedua kaitannya dengan mobil listrik memang ada satu joke juga memang kadang-kadang kalau bahwa kita dipaksa pakai mobil listrik, tetapi listriknya masih pakai batu bara gitu ya, kira-kira gitu. Jadi sebenarnya juga otomatis itu masih ada pencemaran gitu. Tetapi memang gini Pak, kalau kita bicara penggunaan mobil listrik di negara-negara lain yang sudah lebih dulu, misalkan negara-negara Skandinavia misalkan gitu Pak, memang dari berdasarkan data itu memang penurunan emisinya memang lebih lebih cepat. Jadi artinya adalah bahwa penggunaan mobil listrik itu memang akan membantu dalam penurunan kadar karbon emisi. Nah, mungkin yang di Indonesia mungkin memang harus direview kira-kira, direview tidak cuma mobil listriknya, tetapi mungkin memang seluruh value chain-nya itu mengerti review secara hati-hati, secara tepat ya, sehingga mungkin nanti kita akan tahu sebenarnya bahwa mobil listrik ini efeknya apa dan itu bagaimana antisipasinya. Tapi saya setuju dengan Bapak, memang kadang-kadang ada kontradiksi gitu bahwa mobil listriknya dari batu bara gitu ya. Nah itu sebenarnya juga ada pencemaran juga. Cuman kalau kita refer ke negara-negara memang cukup ada ini Pak. Secara statistik cukup menurunkan kadar emisi Pak. Mungkin begitu Pak.
Semoga Bapak puas jawabannya. Satu penanya, dua yang penjawab. Tadi saya lihat ada dua penanya di sektor sebelah kiri. Bu Mimba, Pak nggak apa-apa ladies first ya Pak. Habis Bu Mimba nanti Bapak boleh sabar sebentar.
Terima kasih Pak Is atas waktunya. Saya ingin bertanya ke Mr. Navin Sasidaran. So please allow me to talk to him in English then. Yeah. So first of all, I would like to extend my gratitude to all of distinguished speakers for your excellent thoughts and sharing to all of us your experiences. So to Mr. Navin Sasidaran, thank you for your interesting presentation just now. So I would like to know your thoughts more about the link. You just, you already explained to all of us about value creation. So could you share to all of us your thoughts about the link between value creation and value capture, especially referring to our role as accountants, as an accountant? I think that's my short question to all of you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for your question. I'm very happy to answer. The link between value creation and value capture, actually it's not an easy question to answer. There's definitely a lot of value out there that people are not tapping on, that needs to be captured. I think whether it's you're creating value or capturing value, I think you just need the right skill sets. Whether it's technological skill sets, whether you need people with the right attitudes, the right business mindset. I think that should be the focus. As an auditor, we audit a lot of companies. We see a lot of potential to capture value that's there for the taking, but nobody's doing it. So I think it's really just a business mindset, business acumen, like I said, data literacy, and all that will probably enable you to capture value that's already there. And you're absolutely right. If you're not capturing value that's there, no point creating value elsewhere, right? So I don't think there's a rocket science answer to that question, but those are my thoughts. Right. I don't know if any of the other panelists want to answer also.
Anyone to add? No? Okay. Hopefully that addressed your question, Bu Mimba. It's very interesting to talk about capturing and creations. Bapak tadi yang tanya di ujung siapa ya? Mohon maaf ya, jadi tertunda. Silakan Pak.
Oke, terima kasih Pak Moderator. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Perkenalkan, nama saya Mei Henry dari IAI Sumatera Barat. Menarik sekali tadi ada paparan pertama terkait dengan kripto. Jadi memang sesuatu yang betul-betul baru. Kemudian yang ingin saya dapatkan gambaran, apakah benar pola pikir saya, bayangan saya adalah kripto itu kita bisa menggunakan fair value. Karena fair value itu adalah salah satu solusi yang ditawarkan oleh IFRS di dalam penilaian aset. Tetapi kalaupun tidak, mungkin narasumber punya pengukuran lain. Karena dari akuntansi itu 3 hal yang tidak bisa kita lepaskan: pengakuan, pengukuran, dan pengungkapan. Ya, jadi ini kan 3 hal yang jadi patron kita di dalam bekerja. Kemudian yang kedua terkait dengan karbon karena sustainability, penggunaan mobil listrik terutama bagi kita di daerah itu betul-betul jadi trouble. Alasannya adalah sederhana saja, tempat pengisiannya itu di daerah belum ada. Kemudian keterbatasan teknisi di dalam memperbaiki kalau mobil listriknya itu rusak gitu. Jadi ini kan kalau di dalam suatu strategi bisnis kan suatu produk yang diluncurkan itu harus tersedia after sale service-nya. Nah, ini yang perlu mungkin juga dipertimbangkan kebijakannya. Jadi jangan kebijakan dalam tanda petik yang dalam tanda terkesan memaksakan. Mohon maaf itu saja. Terima kasih, banyak maaf. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Mungkin terima kasih untuk pertanyaannya Pak. Mungkin perlu saya kali disclosure juga karena saya sebenarnya juga orang IT. Jadi mohon bisa nanti kita bisa pelajari bersama lagi. Tapi memang fair value itu kan berarti impact-nya langsung ke profit and loss ya. Sedangkan apabila dilakukan revaluasi mungkin masuk ke OCI. Jadi tergantung tujuan memiliki kripto itu awalnya apa Pak? Apabila memang untuk diperjualbelikan, apabila perusahaan Bapak itu adalah perusahaan crypto exchange selesai, karena memang pekerjaannya adalah menjual beli kripto, maka fair value itu rasanya approach-nya memang fair value. Tapi kalau misalnya perusahaan Bapak memiliki kripto sebagai aset investasi, misalnya dipertahankan lebih dari 1 tahun, nah itu seperti setahu saya harus masuk ke revaluation method. Seperti itu Pak. Semoga itu menjawab Pak. Terima kasih.
Saya langsung Pak Esani. Oke, baik Pak. Ya Pak, mungkin memang boleh dibilang semua itu progressing ya Pak ya, saya ngelihatnya gitu. Jadi kalau kita nyebutnya kan yang Bapak maksudkan charging station ya Pak ya. Jadi SKPLU-nya Pak ya, kira-kira gitu Pak ya. Jadi memang kalau kami lihat memang memang kalau masalah charging station ini adalah sesuatu yang sifatnya urgent. Setuju dengan Bapak bahwa yang namanya habis jualan itu harus ada after sale service gitu. Tapi saya lihat sekarang memang banyak perusahaan-perusahaan yang mempunyai inisiatif untuk menyediakan itu Pak. Jadi kalau kita melihat misalkan dari PLN melalui satu anak perusahaannya namanya Icon Plus Pak, itu juga berlomba-lomba untuk untuk melakukan penetrasi ke sana juga. Sehingga kalau lihat, saya bisa membandingkan kira-kira kalau dari beberapa tahun yang lalu atau sekarang itu ya, di mall-mall itu sebelumnya nggak pernah ada nama charging station kalau di Jakarta, tapi sekarang sudah mulai banyak gitu. Bahkan kalau kemarin, saya orang Jogja kebetulan, kalau saya misalkan pulang ke Jogja gitu, sudah mulai banyak juga gitu charging station gitu ya. Jadi saya pikir semuanya pasti akan mulai mengarah ke sana, ada hitung-hitungan bisnisnya pasti akan mengarah ke sana. Tetapi saya percaya bahwa memang sebagai gambaran aja bahwa memang saat ini banyak perusahaan-perusahaan, baik perusahaan sifatnya perusahaan asing, mereka juga tertarik untuk berinvestasi di charging station Pak. Bahkan mereka sudah mulai melakukan studi-studi gitu Pak ya. Dan saya percaya bahwa nanti beberapa tahun ke depan Pak, kalau misalkan dengan pace seperti sekarang, itu yang Bapak khawatirkan di daerah itu minim charging station, itu akan lebih baik Pak, kayak seperti itu. Karena saya ngelihat trennya Pak, ngelihat tren bahwa memang inisiasi dari pemerintah, inisiasi dari bisnis, semuanya yang mengarah ke sana Pak. Demikian.
Terima kasih Pak Flo sudah memberikan pandangan yang optimistik tentang mobil listrik ya. Dan ini sangat baik buat lingkungan hidup kita. I think all the panelists have got all their question and it only Andrew. But finally I saw in the display there is one good question from you Andrew. You can see that question from the display over there. The question was, what impact is AI projected to have on employment in the financial sector, and how might it transform the nature of financial jobs?
Okay, thanks Pak Isnani. I try to understand these questions. Firstly, it talks about the impact, or rather the AI have the impact on employment on financial sector. So in financial sector, I suppose we are asking about banking, securities firms, whatnot, right? And then the next question is about how might it transform the nature of financial jobs. So I like to approach this question in two parts. I think the first part is that the financial sector, whether the AI have impact on the financial sectors in terms of the employment. Although I'm not from the financial sectors, but I can try my best to imagine how AI could impact on the employment for financial sectors. So say for example, investments, right? So AI would be able to plow through big data, help people to analyze companies with the public information, with the announcements out in the market, the things that the company, things that has been in public, where the AI could actually gather the information together with the financial information and perhaps could try to analyze in terms of the return, the financial performance, because now AI can do predictive analysis, right? So this is part of the predictions in terms of risk, in terms of performance as well. So I think from that perspective, employment on the financial sector could be affected in the sense that in the analyst role, you could be having a part that you need to know how to use AI to help, to support you in doing analysis. Whereas on the second part of the questions, it's how to transform the nature of financial jobs. I think I would liken this more of a general question because financial jobs in different sectors, different companies, were more or less the same, whereas they have some nuances or specific to it. But in general, is that AI automations is going to take over the mundane job, right? Those low-value jobs, those things that does not require judgment, and those will be replaced by AI and machines. Whereas for us as financial professionals, we need to move ourselves up the chain to be more business strategic partnering role, apply more of a judgment, more of a critical thinking. Say for example, like now, like Microsoft Open Copilot has really out in the market. In the past, finance, okay, at least we thought that, oh, with finance, we can do some financial presentation slides. Okay, this is not going to be replaced by AI. Is that true? No. With Copilot, they can help people to prepare presentation slides nowadays. So long that you have a script of your presentation, the Copilot could then translate the language into presentation slides. As easy as that. For example, in budgeting tools, I've seen budgeting tools now in the market whereby once you have all the budgeting numbers in the system, you just need to go through a chatbot and ask them, what are the top 5 best sellers model over the past 5 years? And then the budgeting tool can churn out a chart for you. You no longer need financial people to go and create charts, fancy charts anymore. That itself will create a chart for you. So I think from that perspective, it's how we continue to make ourselves relevant. I think I can't repeat more, emphasize enough, is that how do we continue to evolve by acquiring the new skills that will help us to be future-proof, fit for the future. I think that will continue to be something that we'll continuously face as technology evolve.
Thanks Andrew. Tadinya udah mau ditutup, cuman tiba-tiba nongol pertanyaan lagi satu lagi. Nanti Bapak kalau ada pertanyaan tolong jangan tekan enter dulu supaya kita makan siangnya kagak delay. Sepakat ya. Tapi Navin has got a question to address. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I think the question is, how can businesses leverage digital technologies to create new value propositions for their customers? I mean, quick and simple answer is, like what I spoke about earlier is, don't just do digital for the sake of doing digital, right? Do it because you have the objective. So the objective here is value proposition for your customer. And it's different for every industry. If I can use the example of Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos once famously said, the reason why he can be so successful and make so much money despite all the new competitors is that he always remembers one thing. Customers always want things faster and they want things cheaper. Right? If you can always remember that, if he has that value proposition in the center of his mind and he creates everything to deliver that value. So similarly, you must also do that for your business. And I think to link to the kind lady's question on value capture, is once you've delivered that value proposition, you need to be able to capture that value from your customer. No point giving something better and faster if you're not charging more or you're not extracting the value for the business, right? So that's also the link between value creation and value capture. So I hope that helps to answer that question. Thank you.
Alright, Navin. Tadi ada penanya menggunakan istilah mobil hibrida. Saya kira kelapa doang yang ada hibrida. Jadi saya juga perkenankan menutup session ini menggunakan pantun hibrida, maksudnya bahasa Inggris dan bahasa Indonesia. Kembang mengkudu, budidaya agronomi. Cakep ya. What can I do to make you love me? Thank you very much. I'm Isnani Ahdiat. Hope to see you again. Di Irian ada aura kasih, akhir kata sekian dan terima kasih.